Now, when we think of the 1980s, most people remember neon lights, arcade games, shoulder pads, and, of course, those feel-good classics like E.T. and Back to the Future. But hidden beneath the mainstream blockbusters were films so shocking, so disturbing, that entire countries banned them. These weren't just movies, they were cinematic bombs, challenging society's comfort zones, triggering censors, and in some cases, even leading directors to court. So today we're diving into 13 of the most banned and controversial movies of the 1980s. Some pushed the limits of religion, others explored twisted body horror, and a few dared to question politics and power. Grab your popcorn or maybe a stress ball, because this is going to be a wild ride. Number 1. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. Let's start with one of the most notorious films of all time, Cannibal Holocaust. This Italian shocker wasn't just banned, it was practically hunted down by governments worldwide. Why? Because it blurred the line between reality and fiction in the most disturbing way possible. The story follows a film crew who travel into the Amazon jungle to document a tribe, but what unfolds is a nightmare of violence, exploitation, and shocking brutality. The film was so realistic that director Ruggero Deodato was actually arrested in Italy. Authorities believed he had created a real-life snuff film and forced him to prove in court that his actors were still alive. On top of that, the movie included actual animal cruelty on screen, which made it even more controversial and led to bans in over 50 countries. Love it or hate it, Cannibal Holocaust is often credited as the godfather of the found footage genre, inspiring movies like The Blair Witch Project. But its legacy is forever tied to one word: banned. Number 2. The Last Temptation of Christ. From cannibals to controversy of a different kind, Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ might not look like a horror movie, but it scared religious authorities all over the world. This film presented a very human version of Jesus, showing him facing doubt, temptation, and even imagining an alternate life outside of crucifixion. For some, this was a powerful exploration of faith. For others, it was straight-up blasphemy. In fact, protests erupted outside cinemas, some screenings were attacked, and in many countries, the movie was outright banned. Religious groups across the globe tried to shut it down, arguing it was too dangerous for believers to watch. But Scorsese stood by his vision, saying the film wasn't about disrespect, it was about exploring the human side of spirituality. Whether you agree or not, this movie still sparks debates decades later. Number 3. Hail Mary, 1985. Staying with religion for a moment, Jean-Luc Godard's Hail Mary was another film that censors couldn't handle. This French drama retells the story of the Virgin Mary, but in a modern setting. Mary is a teenager, Joseph is a taxi driver, and instead of angelic miracles, the film uses a surreal artistic style that many found deeply offensive. In countries like Brazil and Argentina, the film was banned for years. Even the Vatican condemned it, calling it blasphemous. What really pushed people over the edge was the combination of nudity, sexuality, and sacred themes. But despite the bans, others praised it as a bold piece of art. To this day, Hail Mary is one of those movies you either see as pure genius or pure heresy. Number 4. Altered States. Okay, let's move away from religion and head into the world of trippy science fiction. Altered States, directed by Ken Russell, is a psychedelic horror about a scientist experimenting with sensory deprivation and hallucinogenic drugs. William Hurt plays the lead, and his experiments go so far that his body starts transforming, devolving into a primitive, almost animalistic state. The visuals were groundbreaking for the time, with wild body transformations and surreal hallucination sequences. Censors, of course, weren't happy. Religious groups called it blasphemous, some countries demanded cuts, and others banned it altogether, claiming the film promoted drug use and dangerous ideas about human evolution. Even critics couldn't agree. Some hailed it as visionary, others dismissed it as excessive and disturbing. Either way, it was one of the boldest sci-fi horror films of the decade. Number 5. Liquid Sky. Next up, a neon-drenched cult classic, Liquid Sky. This low-budget indie film is about invisible aliens who come to New York City and feed on humans. But here's the twist. They don't feed on blood or flesh. Instead, they consume the chemicals released in the brain during sex and drug use. Yeah, you can see why censors had a problem with that. The movie dives deep into themes of sexuality, gender identity, and the wild new wave club scene of the early 80s. Actress Anne Carlisle plays both the female and male leads, which was groundbreaking at the time. But governments weren't ready for its mix of sex, drugs, and aliens. It was banned or heavily censored in several countries, with critics calling it morally corrupting. Yet, over time, Liquid Sky gained a huge cult following for its unique visuals and daring ideas.
6. Possession, 1981. If you thought the previous films were wild, then you truly need to buckle up, because Andrei Zulawski's Possession exists on an entirely different plane of cinematic insanity. This film begins innocently enough, masquerading as a messy divorce drama set against the bleak backdrop of Cold War-era Berlin, but within minutes it spirals into a psychological, body horror, and existential nightmare. The story follows Anna and Mark, played by the incredibly intense Isabel Adjani and Sam Neill, a couple whose marriage is not just falling apart, but completely shattering in a terrifying, visceral manner. Instead of typical arguments, their breakdown manifests in surreal horror, grotesque tentacle creatures, and one of the most disturbing, raw, and physically demanding performances ever committed to film, primarily from Adjani. Her portrayal of a woman unraveling, driven by a dark, unknown secret, is nothing short of legendary. The film delves deep into themes of infidelity, paranoia, and the monstrous nature of human relationships pushed to their absolute breaking point, using the supernatural and the grotesque as a metaphor for internal decay. The infamous subway scene, where Anna experiences a violent, almost seizure-like breakdown amidst a throng of commuters, is still talked about today as one of the most shocking and unforgettable moments in cinema history. Adjani's physical and emotional commitment to this scene is so extreme that it blurs the line between acting and genuine psychological torment. Possession is widely regarded as an art house horror masterpiece, yet commercially and critically it was a battleground, triggering intense reactions from audiences and, most notably, from censors worldwide. Censors were utterly bewildered and terrified by Possession. In the UK, the film was outright banned and infamously added to the notorious Video Nasties list, a collection of films deemed too extreme for public consumption, usually alongside hardcore exploitation horror. Number 7. Tetsuo, the Iron Man, 1989. Now let's journey to Japan for one of the craziest, most avant-garde cyberpunk experiments ever committed to celluloid. Shinya Tsukamoto's Tetsuo, the Iron Man. This isn't just a movie. It's a visceral, sensory assault, a jarring descent into a dystopian landscape where man and machine violently merge. This black-and-white underground film tells the story of a salaryman whose mundane life takes a horrific turn when his body mysteriously begins fusing with metal after a bizarre accident. We're not talking about subtle changes. We're witnessing drills violently erupting from flesh, twisted stop-motion transformations, and nightmarish industrial visuals that feel like a punk rock fever dream brought to life. Tsukamoto utilizes incredibly inventive, low-budget practical effects to create a truly unique and disturbing vision of body horror, transforming the human form into something grotesque and alien. The film relentlessly pushes the boundaries of visual storytelling, making every frame a psychological assault. Made for an astonishingly low budget of roughly $17,000, the movie possesses a raw, gritty, and terrifying aesthetic that is both shocking and undeniably captivating. However, its extreme content proved far too challenging for many censors. Some countries outright banned it, openly admitting their inability to classify it. Was it pornographic, a work of art, or simply the deranged product of a madman? The film's frenetic editing, relentless industrial soundtrack, and grotesque imagery created a cacophony of discomfort, rendering it a censor's absolute worst nightmare.
Number 8. Robocop, 1987. You probably didn't expect to see Robocop on a list of the most banned and controversial films of the 1980s, but trust me, this wasn't just a fun sci-fi action flick. Paul Verhoeven's Robocop was, and still is, a masterclass in brutal satire, a film so unflinchingly violent and bitingly critical that it pushed the boundaries of what mainstream cinema could achieve. Directed by the inimitable Paul Verhoeven, Robocop tells the story of Alex Murphy, a dedicated Detroit police officer who is brutally murdered in the line of duty, only to be resurrected as a corporate-owned cyborg by the Omni Consumer Products (OCP) Corporation. On the surface, it delivers thrilling action sequences and a cool, iconic hero. But beneath the explosions, robot fights, and catchphrases, it's a searing, brutal satire about corporate greed, the privatization of public services, unchecked urban decay, and the chilling idea of human life being treated as utterly disposable. The film brilliantly portrays a near-future dystopia where corporations wield absolute power, sacrificing ethics for profit. The film's graphic violence was so extreme that even American censors at the MPAA, Motion Picture Association of America, demanded significant cuts before they would grant it an R rating. Scenes like Murphy's excruciating execution, where he's riddled with bullets, or the infamous toxic waste death of one of the villains, were deemed far too graphic and visceral for general audiences. In the UK and many other countries, the film faced heavy censorship, with some regions only allowing severely edited versions to be shown. Verhoeven famously battled the MPAA multiple times, having to trim scenes repeatedly to reduce the excessive gore and maintain the R rating rather than an X, highlighting just how impactful and uncomfortable the violence was.
Number 9. Society, 1989. Okay, now we're truly diving into the realm of the grotesque and the politically charged. Brian Yuzna's Society is a cult classic of body horror that comes with a biting, uncomfortable political message. This film isn't just designed to make you squirm, it's designed to make you question the very fabric of class and power dynamics. The story follows Bill Whitney, a privileged Beverly Hills teenager who feels increasingly alienated from his wealthy, seemingly perfect family. His growing paranoia eventually leads him to uncover a horrifying truth. His affluent family and their high society friends aren't just rich and snobby, they are actually a different species, an elite, parasitic race that literally survives by shunting and consuming the lower classes. And when I say consume, I mean in the most grotesque, squab-inducing, and physically repulsive way imaginable. The film is a blatant, in-your-face metaphor for class exploitation, where the rich quite literally feed off the poor, both physically and socially. The film's climax, famously known as the shunting, is one of the most utterly disgusting and bizarre special effects sequences ever committed to film. Bodies melt, merge, twist, and deform into a slimy, fleshy, and highly disturbing orgy of horror, defying all natural anatomy. The practical effects by Screaming Mad George are legendary for their unsettling realism and sheer inventiveness, pushing the boundaries of what audiences could stomach. This sequence isn't just shocking, it's a grotesque ballet of flesh and fluid that you can't unsee. Unsurprisingly, Society was banned or heavily censored in several countries. Authorities were particularly unnerved by its provocative class warfare message, fearing it could incite social unrest or resentment among different economic strata. Beyond the political fears, the sheer visuals of the shunting and other body horror elements were considered far beyond disturbing, pushing the limits of what was deemed acceptable for public viewing. Censors found themselves confronting a film that was not only gory, but also deeply unsettling on a philosophical level. Number 10. The Fly, 1986. David Cronenberg's The Fly is often remembered as a hugely successful Hollywood hit, a critically acclaimed and commercially successful remake. However, many people tend to forget just how truly shocking and viscerally disturbing it was when it first came out. This isn't just a monster movie. It's a profoundly tragic and emotionally devastating body horror masterpiece that will get under your skin and into your heart. Jeff Goldblum delivers an iconic performance as Seth Brundle, a brilliant but eccentric scientist who accidentally fuses his DNA with a common housefly during a teleportation experiment. Initially, the transformation seems to grant him superhuman abilities, increased strength, agility, and a heightened sex drive. But slowly, inevitably, his body begins a horrific, agonizing process of decay, mutation, and transformation into something monstrous, something no longer quite human. The film meticulously details his physical and mental deterioration, turning him into a creature dubbed Brundlefly. His brilliant mind spirals into madness as his humanity literally dissolves before our eyes. The practical effects, designed by Chris Wallace and Stéphane Dupuis, were groundbreaking and rightly earned an Academy Award. However, they were also utterly nauseating. We're talking about fingernails falling off, oozing flesh, teeth rotting, and some of the most grotesquely detailed and gut-wrenching transformation sequences ever put on film. Each stage of Brundle's decay is depicted with unflinching realism, making it incredibly difficult to watch, but impossible to ignore. The horror doesn't just come from the visual gore, but from the slow, agonizing loss of self and dignity. Censors in Germany, Japan, and other countries demanded significant cuts to some of the more disturbing scenes, including the infamous birth nightmare sequence and the later, more graphic transformation scenes. Many argued that the film's explicit focus on disease, deterioration, and bodily fluids was too disturbing for general audiences, especially given the widespread fear and uncertainty surrounding the AIDS crisis at the time. The film tapped into primal fears of bodily invasion and uncontrollable illness.
Number 11. Dead Ringers, 1988. Let's continue our exploration of David Cronenberg's work with another of his chilling classics, Dead Ringers. This film represents a different, more insidious kind of horror, one that resides not in external monsters or grotesque transformations, but within the intricate, twisted corridors of the human mind. It's a psychological drama steeped in medical macabre that will leave you profoundly unsettled long after the credits roll. Jeremy Irons delivers an absolutely astounding dual performance as identical twin gynecologists, Beverly and Elliot Mantle. These brothers share everything: their medical practice, their patients, their intimate secrets, and ultimately, their horrifying descent into a shared madness. Irons masterfully differentiates between the shy, sensitive Beverly and the confident, manipulative Elliot, creating two distinct yet inextricably linked personalities. Their codependency, initially a source of strength, gradually becomes a destructive force, blurring the lines of individual identity. The film meticulously explores themes of identity, obsession, and the dark side of intimacy, particularly in the sterile yet deeply personal world of gynecology. This film was banned or heavily censored in several countries, not primarily because of gore or overt violence, but because of its profoundly disturbing subject matter and the uncomfortable psychological territory it dared to explore. As their mental state deteriorates, the twins begin creating bizarre, almost medieval-looking inhuman surgical instruments designed for what they describe as mutant women. Their shared obsession spirals into drug abuse, intense paranoia, and eventually, a devastating tragedy. The film's cold, clinical aesthetic, combined with the escalating psychological horror, created an atmosphere of deep unease rather than jump scares.
Censors argued that the film's depiction of medical horror crossed ethical and moral lines. The unsettling portrayal of the twins' medical practices and their disturbing custom-made instruments raised concerns about its impact on public perception of the medical profession and its potential to cause anxiety or disgust. Critics, however, lauded it as one of Cronenberg's most haunting, intelligent, and finely crafted works. They praised its nuanced exploration of the human psyche, its profound character study, and Irons' tour-de-force performance. Dead Ringers is less about monsters on the outside and far more about the insidious monsters that dwell within the human mind. It's a film that won't just disturb you, it will make you question the nature of identity, the dangers of extreme codependency, and the fragility of sanity. It's a powerful and deeply unsettling masterpiece that will linger with you, forcing you to confront uncomfortable truths about obsession and the darkness that can lurk beneath a seemingly normal surface. Number 12. Threads, 1984. Now we move from the internal horrors of the mind to something far more terrifying and globally devastating: nuclear war. Threads isn't just a movie. It's widely considered one of the most chillingly realistic and profoundly disturbing television films ever made. Produced in the UK at the height of the Cold War in 1984, this film served as a stark, uncompromising warning about the unthinkable consequences of nuclear conflict. The film meticulously depicts what would realistically happen if nuclear weapons were launched over Britain. It follows ordinary families in Sheffield as society systematically collapses into unimaginable chaos, widespread radiation sickness, irreversible environmental destruction, and eventually mass starvation. Unlike most apocalyptic narratives, Threads offers no heroes, no last-minute rescues, and absolutely no hope. It presents a raw, brutal, and scientifically informed realism, showing every agonizing step from the initial warning signs to the long-term, irreversible collapse of civilization. The narrative deliberately uses a documentary-style approach, making the horror feel terrifyingly plausible. While Threads wasn't outright banned everywhere in the traditional sense, it was heavily restricted and often pulled from broadcasts due to its overwhelmingly harrowing content. Broadcasters and government officials feared its potential psychological impact on the public, believing it was too horrifying for general audiences. Many viewers were left traumatized, and its screening sparked widespread public debate about nuclear disarmament. It challenged viewers to confront the true, unglamorous cost of nuclear war, stripped of all Hollywood sensationalism. The film's impact was so profound that even government officials acknowledged it as one of the most accurate and disturbing depictions of nuclear war ever filmed. It left an indelible mark on a generation, influencing public opinion and informing discussions around global policy. Its legacy isn't just cinematic, it's socio-political. To this day, Threads leaves audiences utterly shaken, offering no solace or easy answers. It's not merely a film, it's a terrifying, unforgettable lesson, a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for self-destruction, and a powerful argument for peace. Its chilling relevance endures, especially as global geopolitical tensions ebb and flow, making it a timeless and essential piece of cautionary filmmaking.
Number 13. Faces of Death, 1978-80s cult phenomenon. Now, our final entry isn't your typical sci-fi or horror story with actors and a fictional plot. Instead, it's one of the most infamous, morally ambiguous, and highly controversial underground tapes of the 1980s. Faces of Death. This film became an urban legend, a forbidden curiosity whispered about in schoolyards and secretly traded among horror aficionados. This so-called documentary, created by John Alan Schwartz, credited as Conan le Sillère, claimed to present real footage of death from various sources: gruesome accidents, graphic executions, brutal animal killings, and horrifying war scenes. While some parts were undeniably staged with practical effects, a significant number of segments were undeniably real. It was this chilling blend of authentic death and simulated violence that made it so incredibly controversial and terrifyingly effective. The film blurred the critical line between reality and entertainment, leaving viewers to grapple with the authenticity of what they were witnessing. When this VHS tape began circulating widely around the world in the 80s, governments and censorship boards panicked. Its immediate impact was immense. It was swiftly added to the infamous UK Video Nasties list, a designation for films deemed obscene and dangerous. Australia, New Zealand, and Norway, among many others, banned it outright. In total, Faces of Death was prohibited in over 40 countries. Authorities argued it wasn't just disturbing, it was ethically irresponsible and potentially dangerous precisely because it desensitized viewers to real violence and death, making it difficult for them, particularly younger audiences, to discern between fact and fiction. Censors feared the movie could desensitize people to violence, normalize extreme acts, or even inspire copycat behavior. The very act of renting or watching this tape at the time carried a subversive, almost illicit thrill, making you feel like you were breaking a social taboo. It cultivated a forbidden aura, becoming a badge of daring for those brave or foolish enough to seek it out. The immense controversy, however, only fueled the franchise's notoriety. It spawned multiple sequels throughout the 80s and beyond, each attempting to outdo the last in terms of shock value. Whether you view Faces of Death as exploitative trash designed purely for shock, or a grim, albeit manipulative reflection of society's morbid fascination with death, one thing is for sure. It became one of the most banned, most talked about, and most unforgettable cult films of all time. Its legacy is a testament to the power of provocative content, even if that content is deeply unsettling and ethically questionable. Okay, and there you have it. 13 of the most banned, controversial, and profoundly shocking movies from the 1980s, from cannibalistic tribes and mind-bending body horror transformations to the chilling realities of nuclear apocalypse and widespread religious outrage. These films were far more than just mere entertainment. They were cinematic provocations, daring to challenge audiences, governments, and entire cultures to confront uncomfortable truths. Some were banned for years, others remain restricted even today, but all of them, in their own unique and often disturbing ways, left a permanent, undeniable mark on the history of cinema. They forced us to look at ourselves, our societies, and the dark corners of the human experience. So what do you think? Have you been brave enough to watch any of these controversial movies? Which one shocked you the most, or which one do you think deserved its ban? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the darker, more forbidden side of 80s cinema, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next exploration into the movies they tried to hide from us. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and always remember, sometimes the most forbidden films are precisely the ones worth watching.